that the claim is strong within its tested limits, but the limits themselves are very narrow.
Ignoring that uncertainty leads to this dangerous, authoritative misrepresentation of knowledge.
And it completely destroys trustworthiness in the long run. Uncertainty is non-negotiable for achieving what the framework calls epistemic honesty.
That leaves us with the final component. Component 6, provenance. This is the one that tracks the history of the MUT.
Provenance tracks the entire life cycle of that minimal truth unit. When was it created? What specific evidence informed that creation? When was it revised? And crucially, why did the revisions occur? Was it new evidence? Was it a correction of a faulty assumption? Was it a change in interpretation? All of it is logged.
This brings up that really insightful question the framework poses. Why is time part of truth in this system?
Because knowledge is inherently dynamic. It's temporary. A claim that was perfectly justified 5 minutes ago, based on all the evidence available then, might be completely overturned 5 minutes from now by new, contradictory data.
So without provenance.
Without provenance, you can't trust any claim because its validity is divorced from the moment in time it was assessed. Provenance isn't just about archiving old versions, it's the instant auditability layer. If a key claim changes, I can immediately see whether that revision happened because new external data arrived or because the system changed its internal normalization rules about old data.
It's radical transparency.
Yeah, that's what it is.
The minimal truth unit, when you take all 6 components together, it forces this immense scientific discipline into the very structure of data. It ensures that every single claim is bounded, it's referenced, it's contextual, and it's always, always ready for challenge.
Absolutely.
We've seen the process and we've seen the structure. Now we get to look at the system's constitution, what the framework calls the system invariants. These are the non-negotiable, fundamental rules that override everything else.
Everything. They override convenience, they override performance, even aesthetic concerns. They are the absolute guardrails of epistemic integrity.
And the framework is clear. If any component of the system, the database, the reasoning engine, the UI, whatever, violates one of these invariants,
that component must be changed. The rule is the rule. These invariants ensure the system can never stray from its core mission of verifiable justification.
Let's start with invariant 1, raw evidence immutability.
This is foundational. It's the bedrock. Once raw evidence is ingested into the system, it must never, ever be altered, modified, or overwritten. Never. This rule preserves provenance. Absolutely. It ensures that all subsequent reasoning can be traced all the way back to the original untouched inputs.
So if I find a typo in an original research paper that was ingested, even if it's a tiny, obvious error, I cannot just go in and fix it in the evidence layer?
You cannot. You must log that correction as new feedback. That feedback then forces a revision in the normalization or interpretation layer, which will eventually revise the claim. But the original evidence itself has to remain exactly as it was first received.
Because if you modify the evidence,
you destroy the entire justification chain. You lose the original source of truth, and the whole thing collapses.
Got it. Okay, invariant 2, mandatory claim evidence linkage. This sounds like the enforcement mechanism for the MUT's evidence reference component we just talked about.
It is, but it's elevated to an invariant to emphasize its absolute severity. Every single claim must explicitly reference the evidence that supports it. This invariant is specifically designed to forbid uncited or self-referential claims,
which are the root cause of hallucination.
The root cause of hallucination and circular reasoning in so many AI systems. This rule makes that impossible.
So, to use a real-world example, if a scientific study that supports a key claim is later retracted by the journal,
then the system have an immediate, non-optional, and fully traceable obligation to revise or reject that claim. The evidence linkage provides that immediate vulnerability that's required for rapid, justified self-correction. If the evidence goes away, the claim cannot stand.
Invariant 3, explicit uncertainty is required. Again, we see this theme. Epistemic honesty is absolutely non-negotiable.
It is. All claims must explicitly record their uncertainty right alongside their confidence. This is the constant programmatic enforcement of the idea that knowledge is probabilistic. It is never absolute.
And confidence without uncertainty is dangerous.
It creates misleading authority, and it actively degrades trust the moment the system inevitably encounters its own limits.
Invariant 4 is, I think, really profound. Separation of evidence, interpretation, and belief. This is the holy trinity of the system that must never be allowed to collapse into itself.
This rule is the system's defense against its own internal propaganda. Evidence, the raw, immutable facts. Interpretation, the proposed meanings and hypotheses, and belief, the currently accepted claims, all must remain structurally and strictly separated at all times.
What's the failure mode here? What happens if they're allowed to blend together?
If the system's current belief, say, that a particular hypothesis is correct, is allowed to go back and subtly influence or contaminate the evidence or interpretation layers, then the entire historical record becomes corrupted.
Can you give us an analogy for that?
Imagine a scientist who is so convinced of their conclusion, their belief, that they go back and tweak their raw lab notes, the evidence, to make them fit better.
The whole process becomes untrustworthy.
Completely. The system would lose its ability to honestly review its own history, to justify its current stance, and to truly learn from its past failures.
That makes perfect sense. The separation preserves the integrity of the audit trail. Invariant 5 follows from that, versioning and traceability of knowledge.
Right, this ties directly into the idea of provenance, and it's required for the system to have a continuous learning model. All claims and all beliefs have to be versioned and traceable over time.
This guarantees the system can explain not just what it currently believes,
But how that knowledge evolved, what specific piece of feedback triggered the change, and why the revision occurred. If you can't trace the changes, you can't justify the present. The system's decisions would be unaccountable.
And then there's invariant 6, and I think this is such a crucial rule for dealing with modern AI systems. No model output is truth by default.
This is the critical reality check. It applies to every single machine learning component that might be operating inside Discovery Intelligence. Model outputs are explicitly not considered to be truth within the system, regardless of how successful their training was or their statistical accuracy.
So even if an internal model generates, say, a new chemical formula and it has a 99.99% statistical confidence that it's a viable compound,
That output is still treated as just a hypothesis, nothing more.
it has to earn its way to becoming knowledge.
Absolutely. Model outputs can only contribute to the knowledge base after they have been converted into formal claims, run all the way through the canonical discovery loop, and been successfully justified by external immutable evidence.
Because treating the models themselves as authoritative
Leads inevitably to overconfidence. It undermines the scientific humility that the entire framework is built to demand. The models are just sophisticated idea machines. They don't get a vote on what is true until they've done their homework and shown their work, just like everything else.
The structural discipline that we've covered so far is rigorous. It's almost brutally so.
It is.
But what I find equally insightful is the next section of the framework, the explicit non-goals. This is this concept of intentional restraint.
Yes.
The system is intentionally designed to fail at certain tasks early on in order to succeed at the ultimate goal, which is trustworthiness.
It's governance through a kind of disciplined self-denial. The framework explicitly states that systems often fail because they try to achieve everything all at once, right from the beginning. These non-goals give the developers the crucial authority to say, not yet.
And that preserves the initial focus on epistemic discipline before all the external pressures can corrupt it.
Exactly.
So let's start with non-goal 1, autonomy, V0. Full, unsupervised operation is strictly forbidden in the beginning.
Correct. Premature autonomy risks the system producing unexamined and unjustified claims simply because it's been left to its own devices. Humans have to remain in the loop.
As the final arbiter.
As the final arbiter, responsible for evaluating the quality of the evidence, for validating the claims, for auditing the inference chains. The system is intended to be an intelligent collaborator that does the hard, rigorous work of synthesis. But human oversight is the final judge of truth quality.
But here's the tension. In the race to market, where every competitor is touting full automation and real-time processing, doesn't adopting these non-goals risk making the system seem irrelevant?
That is the central conflict. And that leads directly to non-goal 2, real-time operation V0. The framework intentionally rejects the pursuit of immediate, low-latency responses.
Why reject speed so completely at the start?
Because speed is the enemy of rigor. It just is. Optimizing for speed encourages shortcuts. You start skipping steps in the normalization process. You cut corners on the justification linkage. You reduce how much provenance you preserve. You start blurring the lines between interpretation and belief.
You break all the rules.
You break all the rules to get a faster answer. Discovery intelligence prioritizes correctness, justification, and traceability over speed. If it takes an hour to produce a result that is 100% justified, traceable, and uncertainty-aware, that is exponentially more valuable than a 5-second answer that you can't trust or verify.
Trust is the currency here, not velocity.
That's the core principle.
And non-goal 3 is very similar. Scale and performance optimization are also non-goals in early versions.
You cannot scale a broken epistemic process. It's that simple. Before the system is allowed to handle billions of data points, its initial smaller-scale claims and evidence and reasoning must be manually inspectable and validated by humans.
Because if you pursue scale before, you've guaranteed correctness.
You guarantee that any foundational errors or biases are magnified by orders of magnitude. You immediately corrupt the very trust that the governance framework was designed to build. You have to build the structure correctly first, then you can worry about making it big.
Non-goal 4 is all about focus. End-user productization, V0 is rejected, so no shiny consumer-facing apps at the beginning.
Right. The focus has to remain exclusively on epistemic correctness and verifiable rigor, not on usability metrics or user experience design. In the early stages, the intended user is the system's creator, or the researcher, or the scientific collaborative people who understand and respect the governance requirements.
And premature productization just diverts resources.
It diverts limited resources and, more importantly, limited attention away from that core mandate of building a reliable knowledge structure and toward more superficial, consumer-focused aspects.
And finally, non-goal 5, which I think is the highest expression of the system's humility.
Yeah.
Guaranteed problem solving.
Yes. Discovery intelligence explicitly does not promise to find solutions to the problems you give it. The system accepts that "I don't know" is not only a valid outcome, but an actively valuable one when the evidence is insufficient or the reasoning is incomplete.
So success is defined by epistemic honesty.
Exactly. Not by popularity or by its perceived intelligence. The system's job is to reflect the actual state of knowledge, even if that state is messy and ambiguous.
This entire section, the non-goals, it feels like it provides the necessary shield for the developers. It allows them to resist the commercial pressures that have corrupted the epistemic integrity of so many other systems.
It allows them to choose trustworthiness over market dominance, at least initially. It's a brave choice.
We have completed a massive deep dive into a framework that fundamentally inverts the priorities of the entire modern information landscape.
It really does.
We're moving from a world of statistical likelihood, which is what current AI excels at, toward a world of traceable, justified, and verifiable knowledge.
And we saw how the canonical discovery loop forces that fixed, non-negotiable path from raw evidence all the way to belief, making sure that no step, especially justification, is ever bypassed for convenience.
And we saw how the minimal truth unit ensures that every single piece of knowledge is inherently bounded, it's contextual, it's transparent about its own uncertainty, and it's indelibly linked back to its source evidence, making it revisable and auditable by design.
And finally, those strict system invariants and the highly disciplined explicit non-goals act as that ultimate governance layer, prioritizing structural integrity and intentional restraint over speed, scale, and premature autonomy.
So after all that, what does this all mean for you, the learner, navigating information every single day? Even if you aren't out there building a cutting-edge AI system, this framework gives you an incredibly powerful, practical lens for your own information consumption.
It really does. It gives you an immediate checklist that you can use to evaluate any claim you encounter, whether that's from a scientific journal, a news report, or a generative AI output. It shifts your focus from what is being claimed to how it's being justified.
You now have the questions to ask. Does this claim cite its raw, immutable evidence? Are its specific conditions and its assumptions made explicit? Is the uncertainty stated and quantified?
And if you can't get answers to those questions, then that claim hasn't passed the epistemic firewall. You could treat it as an ungrounded assertion, not as knowledge.
This framework has defined its core operating principle very clearly. Time is part of truth in this system, and all knowledge is contextual and versioned.
Which leads us to our final thought.
And it's a provocative one for you to consider. If all justified knowledge is inherently dynamic, if it's constantly being refined, revised, and potentially overturned by new justified feedback, what does that imply about the stability of any claim that we currently hold to be true?
And, maybe more importantly, what responsibility does that place on all of us as critical learners to proactively seek out and apply justified feedback to our own perpetually evolving understanding of the world?
A profound challenge, demanding rigor not just from our systems, but from our own intellectual processes. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into discovery intelligence.
Until next time.